Iran did much less. So I think Iran was within its legal right, as defined by the ICJ, to engage in those targeted attacks on the Gulf states.
So Iran's retaliation to this assault by what you say are the two beasts, which I completely. I mean, it's a very good metaphor. Their tactical assault was, to respond towards Israel, but also then to hit U.S. assets in the region and also hit key economic assets in the GCC. Now, with hindsight, now that there's as you mentioned, there's a sort of a forced retreat from Trump because he realizes he may be losing, or was losing. Not that there were any victors. But what do you make of that strategy? What's your thoughts on it?
Okay, let me start with the law, which I know fairly well. In 1996, and your viewers, I hope, will forgive me for making a historical reference that goes back more than a week. But in 1996, there was a historic advisory opinion in, by the International Court of Justice. The question was very simple. Is the threat or use of nuclear weapons legal under international law? Is the threat or use of nuclear weapons legal under international law? Now, for the sake of your viewers, let me just break it down very simply. I teach that decision. I teach international law, so I know it very well. And if you know a subject very well, you have the capacity for simplifying it. So, every one of your listeners knows, viewers knows, that under international law, you're not allowed to fire, you're not allowed to indiscriminately bomb. That you have to only target military sites or combatants. You can't indiscriminately bomb everything. You have to spare civilians and civilian sites, civilian infrastructure. As every one of your listeners, viewers knows, a nuclear weapon can't discriminate. A nuclear weapon is inherently indiscriminate. So the question then is, can nuclear weapons be legal under international law because they don't have the capacity for discrimination? They will annihilate many times more civilians than they do combatants if it's used. And civilian infrastructure as against military sites. So the court deliberated over this question, and the final decision was as follows. The court said, under international law, most uses of nuclear weapons, most, are illegal. However, they said the following. If the survival of a state is at stake, in jeopardy, then it's not certain that the use of nuclear weapons is illegal. Now, my view is, if the International Court of Justice says when the survival of a state is at stake, you have the right to use nuclear weapons that would maybe annihilate humanity because of the inevitable escalation. If you use them, the other nuclear power will use them, and then it's terminal. But the ICJ said it's not certain that a state can't use them. In other words, it's possible they can use them. Iran's survival as a state was at stake. About that, I don't think anyone will disagree. It was clear the Israelis simply wanted Iran to disintegrate. They had no concern about the day after. Just wanted Iran to disintegrate as a state. So there are no obstacles to its control over the Middle East. The U.S. by the end was clear they wanted Iran. I mean, given what Trump was saying, to return it to the Stone Age to end Iranian civilization. On those circumstances, Iran, it did target some civilian infrastructure. It did. I never quarrel with facts. In the Gulf states, it attacked bases, but it also targeted civilian infrastructure. Targeting some civilian infrastructure is way less than courting terminal nuclear war. And the ICJ said they may be allowed to use nuclear weapons. Iran did much less. So I think Iran was within its legal right, as defined by the ICJ, to engage in those targeted attacks on the Gulf states. Now, you might say, why the Gulf states? Well, here I'm going to be blunt with you. What do the Gulf states do for Gaza? What do they do for Gaza? Anything? So I say to the Gulf states, cry me a river. You hear me? Cry me a river. Do you know what the Gulf, the GCC did? The first action after the Israeli-American attack? You know what's the first thing they did? Go back and look at the headlines. They announced they were going to increase the availability of oil after the attack. Why? To facilitate the aggression by these wild beasts. If it increased the availability of oil to facilitate the U.S.-Israeli aggression, you know what? It could have reduced the availability of oil to support the people of Gaza. The godforsaken people of Gaza. It could have done something. It did nothing. What it did was it facilitated the U.S.-Israeli aggression against Iran. Cry me a river.